Hey guys, I am Bryce Lewis, 105 kilo world champion, here talking about setup for the bench press and specifically self-unrack. Obviously, most of you guys are in gyms, probably training in commercial gyms by yourself. We want to lift safely and effectively in that position. We don't always have someone to lift off for us, and I've found in competition especially that I've trained myself to lift without a handoff in competition as well. And I'm gonna hopefully explain the reasons why I prefer that. This is a little bit more of an advanced technique and requires that you have an adjustable bench press and probably a grip width that's not overly wide. For those of you guys who have a grip width that's maybe 1.5 to 2 times shoulder width, going towards max competition grip width for the bench press, you may need an unrack. It's just really hard to get any type of developmental power out in this super wide position to set up. So if you're somewhat narrow, if we're talking arm angles of 45 degrees up in towards 90 degrees, you might be a candidate for what we're talking about. But the whole reason for starting this in the first place was so many people get crappy liftoffs in training and in competition. They get the bar dumped on them, the bar is too high, someone releases too early, they're too aggressive. Even with great communication, you can just get some pretty bad handoffs. So I wanted consistency, and I think that's one of my main things that I'm looking for when it comes to setup for the squat, the bench, and the deadlifts is consistency. I want to be able to repeat this thing every time. In competition, maybe you have one person in competition A, another person in competition B. It's just a variable that I want to get rid of if possible. So I started unracking by myself in training. I saw, hey, this feels great. Let me try this in competition. And it continues to feel good. So the second thing it does is get rid of the time, in theory, it gets rid of the time for the person to unrack the bar and then get out of the way before you get the start signal to begin your bench press, which means less time of you waiting there with a max load in your hands, which is fantastic. So it's really about control and setting up an environment that you can repeat as you go forward. So that's what we're doing. If you can train that way, if you can practice that way, then you get to compete that way too and just get rid of a variable. I know a few lifters who have adopted this and it just simplifies things a lot overall. So as far as the unrack in general, let's bring it over to the back here so we can see just kind of what's going on with the upper body. What we want is tightness in the upper body. We're looking for some level of retraction of the scapula back, and kind of packing the shoulders down and back. So if here's my shoulder, I want to set the shoulder down as much as possible and back as much as possible and kind of drive this back into the bench press. And I want to do this on both sides. So down and back into the bench press. This is a position that not only do I want to start here, but I want to stay here throughout the press. And I can get a band and practice this as well. Let me get a small band here. That should work. All right. Yeah, this should work. All right, so I'm putting myself in somewhat of a fly position here. There we go. And with my arms at full extension, I want to just let the tension of the band drive my shoulders back into their sockets. We can do this with a push-up position too, so I'll show that in a minute. But I'm reaching forward with my shoulders, and then I'm just letting the tension pull my shoulders backwards. And this is the position that I want to see if I can get to and stay in while I'm pressing. For some people with a self-unrack, we find that raising the bar off alone is enough to bring you out of an ideal position to pull, which is the reason why we need the bench height to be adjustable, so we can get the bar at the exact lowest height we need to maintain that good position. So I showed you this with a band. I'll show you a similar position on the floor. Just getting into a push-up position and then just letting gravity draw my shoulders back as I sink in and get into this tighter position here. So that's what we're looking for from the upper body. In powerlifting, we want to shorten the range of motion of the barbell as much as possible, which is why people have adopted an arch in the bench. Raising the chest is raising the contact point that we're touching and reduces the range of motion, and also changes the bar path a little bit too, to be slightly more of a curved position than a straight down press. But the big change we're looking for is the reduction in range of motion. We want a stable surface for the lower body, and in USA powerlifting, we need the glutes in contact with the bench, we need the heels and the full foot in contact with the floor as we press. So these are kind of 2 contact points we're looking for, shoulders being a third. So head, shoulders, butt in contact with the bench, feet in contact with the floor, grip around the barbell. So let's see if we can put some of that stuff together and try to sequence this as we go forward. All right, as far as ordering goes, it doesn't matter so much whether you set your hips first or whether you grab the barbell first or whether you set your back first. Just as long as those pieces are present. I know that people have kind of different sequences for that. I like to set my grip first. I like to put my feet down, drive my hips up the bench towards my shoulders, and set my butt in place, then set my feet in place as I'm flattening these feet out. Finally, I'll lift my head, scoot my shoulders down toward my butt, and drive everything in place. And this is my starting position. So again, I'll set my hands first, so my hands are in position. I'll scoot my hips up the bench, so my butt is in position. Set my feet, so my feet are flat. Lift my head, scoot it back, drive down into the bench, take my breath, and this is my unrack. So, if at all possible, when we're benching, we want to minimize the distance we move the barbell from the rack to when we start the actual press. We want to minimize that distance 2 ways. One, we want to minimize that distance vertically. We don't want someone to lift the bar down to us as much as possible. We don't want someone to lift the bar up to us as much as possible. The second thing we want is not to bring the bar out as far as possible, and that means setting yourself up so the barbell is generally somewhere at eye to nose level when you unrack the barbell. So as I'm setting up, and maybe we can get a top-down angle here, we want to see that the barbell right here is kind of centered right around my nose. And as I go to bring that barbell out, this is the direct lift off, and this is my starting position. So I brought the barbell out maybe 3 inches or something like that. We might be able to do even a little bit better if I scoot myself up just a little bit more. Now the barbell is over my mouth, and as I bring the bar out, there we go. So that's a pretty small distance to move the barbell, which means that I can use the same muscles to bring the bar out. I'm not bringing the bar out in an unstable position, kind of behind me, and needing to fight the barbell to get it back up into my starting position. And that's really ideal. So we roll the barbell to the front, set up underneath it, and just bring the bar out a little bit, and this is my starting position. So doing those things allows for consistency, allows for the highest degree of strength overall, repeatability, safety, and that's really what we're looking for. As far as positioning, we want a firm, full grip around the barbell. Grip width can vary between athletes, that's perfectly fine. These were some of the tips we talked about, but we want tension in the glutes, tension in the hamstrings, we want that back tight as we go to unrack the barbell, and we want those shoulders driven back and into the bench press. And I think that kind of summarizes some of the tips for unracking the barbell.